Welcome to the Phillips 66 Big 12 Men's Basketball Championship. We're going to have a little roundtable to discuss what's coming up here in Kansas City at the Sprint Center. I'm Wendell Barnhouse, Big12Sports.com and the Big 12 Digital Network, joined by Schyler Thomas, who's going to be joining me at our post-game reports, and Blair Kerkhoff of the Kansas City Star. If you've seen our past work on the Big 12 Digital Network and Big12Sports.com, you know who this guy is. All right, well, we have semi-breaking news that came out yesterday on Monday, the fact that Joel Embiid is out for the Big 12 tournament. Quickly, with both you guys, tell me first, Schyler, what kind of impact you think that's going to have on Kansas here in Kansas City?
Well, I think it's going to have a huge impact, primarily just on the defensive side of the ball, where his presence creates problems for other teams. You know, whether he's actually blocking the shot or whether he's just that presence down there, it creates havoc for the other team's offense to really get into a rhythm and also get second shots. You know, he's getting about 8 rebounds a game there, so he's limiting those second chance opportunities, getting KU into their fast break, into that motion offense. So it's going to be obviously a huge loss for the Jayhawks, but I think they do have enough talent left, obviously, on the bench there to fill in and still be very competitive and win the Big 12.
Blair, what do you think it might impact Kansas as far as the NCAA tournament bid? They are in play for a number 1 seed. If he doesn't play and they're not sure he can play the first weekend, you know how the NCAA tournament works. They take injuries into account. And also, do you think Kansas needs to win in Kansas City to get a number 1 seed?
Yes, I do. I think they have to win the tournament to be a number 1 seed. I think they're in the hunt with Wisconsin. I think Villanova's probably the 4th number one right now, but Wisconsin, probably the main. Duke, Virginia in the ACC. If one of those teams, Syracuse, if they win the ACC tournament. But yes, I mean, to answer the question, Joel Embiid's injury will have an impact, and the committee will discuss this at when they get to Indianapolis and get in the room with all the committee members. And there's history here. We know that Kenyon Martin's injury for Cincinnati back in 2000 affected Cincinnati's seed, and they were an early bounce out that year. Fab Melo for Syracuse had an injury that the committee talked about. So it'll be discussed. And I actually think Kansas's performance without Embiid in the Big 12 tournament will be a topic. If Kansas has success here, if they can win without Embiid, I think it's full steam ahead. You treat Kansas no differently if they're able to beat NCAA tournament quality teams here without Embiid.
Well, obviously, this Big 12 tournament was going to be wide open regardless of Kansas's status or regardless of having Embiid, because it's been a great season in the Big 12, number 1 RPI in all the categories. Schyler, as far as if someone other than Kansas might have a shot to win it, is there anyone that stands out for you? And I'm going to ask Blair the same question, and you can't pick the same teams, and Schyler gets to go first.
Well, thank you for picking me first on that. And I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash from my Kansas State, constituents on this one, but I think Iowa State has an extremely good shot at winning the Big 12 and making some noise in the dance. They're just a very efficient offensive team. They shoot the ball extremely well, tied for first place in the Big 12 for top scoring offense, and they just get you from all angles. Their guards can post up, their bigs can take you out on the floor, and everybody can hit the 3 ball. So kind of mirroring their head coach, Fred Hoiberg, not being afraid to put the ball up, and just a tough matchup for really anybody to face.
With the rebuttal, Blair Kerkhoff.
I think we look at one side of the bracket, the Kansas side, and we see Kansas, Iowa State, K-State, Oklahoma State, and of course any one of those can win. But I look at the other side, Oklahoma the 2 seed, Texas the 3, Baylor the 7, and that's the one I want to start with. I think Baylor has an opportunity. The way they've finished down the stretch, they've won 7 of 8, had an impressive win at Kansas State to end the regular season, got the height, got the athleticism, they're playing well. Kenny Cherry's healthy now. I think Baylor, it's tough as heck to win 4 games in 4 days. We know that. But I think Baylor has a chance to make a really good run here and solidify, maybe improve its NCAA tournament seeding. But you know who I'm going to pick? I'm going to pick Texas. Texas didn't play well down the stretch. They don't shoot the ball very well, but I love the combination of athleticism and quickness for the Longhorns.
Well, it's interesting with the first-round games, as the guys you've mentioned, the 7 seed is Baylor. They've got 20 wins. They're probably in the NCAA tournament regardless of what happens in Kansas City. Oklahoma State's the 8 seed. They're probably in the NCAA tournament. They've got 20 wins. Everybody talked about, hey, so you want to be the number 2 seed, because you get to play a team. It was no bargain for Oklahoma to get the number 2 seed, because they're probably going to get Baylor, assuming the seeds hold. And Kansas is going to play Oklahoma State, a team that beat them in Stillwater, and without Embiid. So The quarterfinal games on Thursday, Blair, you've seen all the Big 12 championship tournaments. What do you think that the quarterfinals on Thursday are going to be like?
Like a Sweet 16. Seriously, I mean, these matchups potentially can be phenomenal. We're talking, when we talk about the seeds in the Big 12 tournament, we're also talking about seeds in the NCAA tournament. We're talking about Oklahoma State as an 8, Baylor as a 7. Well, that's what they could be in the NCAA tournament the next week. We know Kansas and Texas and Oklahoma, K-State, Iowa State are all going to, be top, 8 seeds somewhere. So, yeah, we're talking Kansas State, Iowa State to open things off, a potential Kansas-Oklahoma State 2. You're going to have 19,000 people in the Sprint Center and 10,000 people outside Sprint Center in the Power and Light District. It's going to be an atmosphere, I think, unlike any we've seen here in Kansas City.
One team we haven't talked about, which could make a run and steal a bid, is West Virginia. They are in good shape because they're 6th seed, which means they don't have to win 4. They only have to win 3. And they're 9-9 in the Big 12, which, obviously a very tough conference. Their non-conference is what hurt them as far as NCAA tournament's concerned. But Schyler, what do you think about them being able to maybe win 3 games, particularly, they've already beaten Kansas, but if Kansas would happen to get knocked off, I mean, this is the kind of tournament where there might be a bunch of upsets. Do you think West Virginia has the ability to maybe win 3 and steal a bid?
I think they definitely have the ability when you've got, a first-team All-Big 12 player in Juwan Staten leading the league in scoring and just imposing his will on every game. I think you've got a shot, and you see that in their last outing against KU where, Staten scores 24, Aaron Harris pours in 28, and the freshman Devin Williams gives you 22. You can get that type of output. Yes, they've got a great shot at it, and with Huggins' defense, that kind of tenacity, I think they've got a great opportunity. But you look at their first-round matchup against Texas, and I don't think that's a favorable matchup for them. They lost both of those games during the regular season against Texas. Were dominated on the boards of 15 rebound margin, at least in both of those games. And they struggle with the size of Texas and being able to, again, rebound and score efficiently in the paint. And so I don't like that matchup for West Virginia. But, when you have a guard like Juwan Staten and Aaron Harris, you can't rule them out.
Well, Blair, I don't know how many times Bob Huggins has lost to the same team 3 times in a season. I don't know if anybody at West Virginia has done that research. I got to imagine hasn't happened very often. I agree with what Schyler said. Texas is probably not a good matchup for West Virginia, but if they happen to get past Texas, what do you think of their chances then? Maybe obviously not knowing what's going to happen with the other half of the bracket.
No, you're right, and both of you made a good point. West Virginia is the one team in the Big 12 that did not have a great non-conference part of the schedule. The Virginia Tech loss, the Purdue loss are 2 that kind of stand out as missed opportunities. So they weren't able to get their RPI to a place where we're talking about them as an at-large team without doing some work here in Kansas City. But they did make their bones in conference play and beat Kansas and beat K-State and beat Iowa State and beat Oklahoma. And some of those, the Kansas game, they're up 25 early in the second half. They beat Iowa State by 25 in Morgantown. They're not in Morgantown, but this is a talented team. And Juwan Staten is a heck of a ball player. And I don't want to say it came out of nowhere, but really is one of the most improved players in the league this year. I thought this was going to be a team for Harris to kind of take over and dominate, but no, it was Juwan Staten. He is wonderful at getting to the free throw line, getting to the basket, and that was, we talked about Embiid earlier. That was a big problem for Kansas. Didn't have the rim protector with Staten driving, and he got to the free throw line 20 times in that game. I agree. I think they're going to give Texas a heck of a game, and they do have a chance to win. If they win that game, who can't they beat here?
It's going to be very interesting. Get things started Wednesday with 2 first-round games, the quarterfinals on Thursdays, the semifinals Friday evening, Saturday night, the championship game, 8 p.m. It's going to be prime time on ESPN. That's a big deal and a big change for the Big 12 for this year. I want to thank Blair Kerkhoff, the Kansas City Star, and Schyler Thomas, who again will be joining me with our post-game coverage on the Big 12 Digital Network. Also want to remind you that we do have a special men's preview show that's up on the Big 12 Digital Network. Look for that and find out and take a look. We preview the upcoming Phillips 66 Big 12 Men's Basketball Championship. From Kansas City, I'm Wendell Barnhouse for the Big 12 Digital Network. Boom!